Hello and welcome to OptimisticWellness.com, the real story interview series. And today I am here with Julien Smith, and Julien Smith he is a badass. He really is. So Julien, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So let's start this off. Julien, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, some of your latest projects like The Flinch, In Over Your Head, and any other awesome things you have going on right now?
Sure. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff going, but where I come from is primarily from radio. I did radio for many, many years, starting like in my early teens when I was just basically doing radio commercials and so on, and that's how I got into podcasting. And then from that point on, what ended up happening is that I sort of got into podcasting professionally. I started doing. I was one of the first professional podcasters in the world. And then from that point on, I got into blogging and I got into social media. And that's essentially how I ended up sort of writing a book and then a few books after that. It became sort of the thing that I do. I sort of hop from media to media online. And so my latest sort of experiment is an experiment with Amazon Kindles called The Flinch, which is what you're referring to now.
Yep. And The Flinch, I read it. Amazing book. Highly recommend everyone reading it. Everyone listening to this interview, check out The Flinch because it's amazing. So, Julien, so let's start from the beginning, as I usually like to do in this. So how was life for you in general, like growing up, childhood, school, and all that good stuff? What are some cool or defining moments growing up that you'd like to share?
I mean, I don't know that I have any specific moments to tell you the truth. I grew up in a pretty normal family. They always were together, and they're still together now. My father was a career counselor, and in a sense, like career counseling, the way that he did it, he used to sort of teach executives and so on, is maybe a form of what it is that I do now. So I don't know if it's that specifically. I also spent a lot of time in learning about Buddhism and religion, so a lot of my work sort of goes into sort of thinking about sort of Zen type subjects and so on. So basically, there's a lot of things going on there that end up with me as an adult having different sort of versions of what I used to do when I was young. But I don't know that there were any necessarily kind of really important moments that transformed anything that I did. Like it sounds like almost like a movie like version of my life, but my life is not a movie at all.
Okay, well, you did mention that your favorite childhood album growing up, I believe, is Paul Simon's Graceland.
Mhm.
How do you feel that music, in particular, influenced you when you were growing up?
I don't know. I used to play the accordion for many, many years, and that was the first album that I listened to and I knew all the words to. And I think a lot of kids that grew up in the '80s probably had the same experience. I know that like my girlfriend loves that album, and lots of other people love that album. But uh, I was heavily musical, and I do think about a lot of things in terms of the writing that I do. I think about things in terms of like the way that they sound in my head. I've always thought about sort of things and how they sort of rhyme with each other in terms of ideas. And it seems to me like any kind of work that you do should always sort of have a cohesive whole, almost like a song. So when I wrote The Flinch, I really thought about it like almost like a film instead of a book, and that's why it came out the way it did, for example.
Wow, that's a really interesting idea, Julian. Like when you're doing work to try to make it like coordinated like a song. That
Hmm.
never heard that before. So that's really interesting. So now we're gonna move on a little bit further down the path. I believe this is college. So I see here you enrolled in art school. I believe for metal sculpting.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
what fueled that decision, and also the decision to eventually drop out and pursue a different path.
I dropped out of school in order to turn myself into an internet guy. It didn't really happen on purpose that way, but it was during the dot-com bubble, and I ended up. I came from art school, like I said, like you said, actually, the idea was to sort of go into metal sculpture, and I did that, and painting and drawing for a long time, and actually, I get back into that now. But in the meantime, I spent a few years sort of on the web and trying to figure that out. And community was sort of quickly the thing that I began to do on the web. So I ran a ton of communities online, and I was obviously participated in them starting from the age of around like 15 or 16 or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And and so it was around '99 or something like that where I started really spending more time on the web, and I sort of dropped art in general. Although I think it's had an impact in the way that I think about things. I largely sort of became a communicator after that, and sort of relating it to sort of blogs and all these other things, and being about the idea instead of being about an object.
Oh, I got you. So by the way, speaking of art, so what drew you to art, like in the beginning? Because I'm actually really curious about this because I am not an art guy at all, and I'm really
Mhm.
I wish I was, but like with
You
the
can
drawing.
be. The reality. I mean, I don't know if this even relates to your question specifically, but art is not a type of person. I think my father would probably disagree with me. He'd say that there are people that are good with ideas, and then people that are good with things or whatever. But I happen to think that people can be good at whatever it is that they choose to be good at or whatever they enjoy. Like you can learn to draw. It's just you might not think that that's the case. But you wouldn't think that about, let's say, swimming, right?
Uh-huh.
You would say, well, I don't swim, but I could learn. You wouldn't say, well, I'm incapable of swimming. I can't do that. You would say, I can swim, I just don't know how. And so it's a little bit the same thing with painting and drawing and anything else. I, I, it's not that I'm incapable of doing it, I just don't know how.
Okay, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. Yeah.
It's just a skill set after all, right?
Y- yes, it is. Drawing, yeah, it is a skill set. And if I guess if you're passionate about it, even if you're not that good at it, if you really want to pursue it, you're right.
Hmm.
You're right. You'll find a way to develop that skill set.
Yeah, and there's a methodology, just like there's a methodology for everything. You can be an efficient swimmer or a bad swimmer, and you could be a good rock climber or a bad rock climber, just the way you can be a good or a bad writer. And the reality is that almost all of life is like this. They have a different set of skill sets, and it's just some of them seem really obscure and arcane, and because of that, you feel like they're unapproachable, or like 100 years ago people were like, oh my god, writing, creating this masterpiece, coming up with ideas, but now the process is very transparent. Art is still not that transparent, but at one point it will become that way.
Wow. Okay. All right. Julian, you've got some really interesting perspectives here. I'm enjoying hearing about it. I got another perspective here. You also talk about fasting, and I also think that's very interesting. In particular, actually, the psychological aspect. I know you're really into like the whole psychological stepping into the fear of going without food for a long period of time. So, what was it like to start fasting, and what are some of the psychological blocks maybe that you've had to overcome?
Well, I've been doing intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not like regular, what the people would think of as fasting is like, oh, I'm going to stop eating for 30 days, the way that monks do it or whatever. But intermittent fasting is the idea of fasting a little bit every day. So every single day I fast at least 16 hours. So obviously I'm asleep for 8 of those hours, but it also means I have only a very brief eating window for my whole day. So usually that's about noon to 8. And I do that for there are psychological reasons. It makes you psychologically hard. It makes you ability to it increases your ability to withstand pain and sort of discomfort. But also on a physiological level, it's something that is actually quite beneficial to you because there are two biological states. One is fasted and one is fed. And most of us modern people spend almost all of our hours in a fed state. We are never in a fasted state, and the fasted state is larger a recuperative sort of regenerative state. This is not like yoga weird kind of like holistic, like non-medicinal bullshit. This is actual biological fact. But fasting also has psychological aspects. The longest time I've ever fasted is probably something like 60 hours when I was in
Wow.
a Zen monastery in Japan. And a friend of mine who was a monk there said something very interesting to me. And I'll never forget what it is. He always said, you're going to have to learn to enjoy hunger. And I said, I don't think I could ever really do that. But he was right, because whatever state that you're in, if you're sort of searching for some other state, it ends up just being kind of a giant waste of time. So it's like whatever state you happen to be in, just kind of work with that. Like I was walking my dog up the hill to see my girlfriend earlier today, and I was like, oh, this walk is so long and uphill. And I'm like, why am I suffering more than I need to? Why am I thinking this through so much that I end up sort of making myself hate it even more than I would if I was just doing it, and then I was doing it, and then I didn't care anymore. Once I stopped sort of overanalyzing it, then it became fine. So fasting is like that.
Julian, I think you hit on one of the main keys to happiness in the mindfulness meditation tradition, in that whatever sensation you're feeling in the moment, whether good or bad, like, just you got to accept it and learn to not only just live with it but enjoy it. I think that's the
Hmm.
key. That's exactly what you just said. And yeah, if people actually learn to live that way, which I see you have demonstrated, the results are just amazing that I
Yeah,
found.
it's definitely a consistent process. Like it never goes away, and you never like just because I'm talking like this, I may sound like I've got it all figured out or something, but it's far from the truth. Like it's a constant sort of struggle or whatever. But you discover that as soon as you stop doing these things, just the same way you might stop going to the gym for a while or something, you become soft and you start becoming soft and you're just like, oh, I can't do it anymore. The next thing you know, you're waking up late. Next thing you know, you just get softer and softer and softer, right? So it really is just a process of, like the Navy SEALs and like other, when the flinch came out, there's all these different kinds of people that embraced it. And part of them were like military people and people that already do like crazy hard kind of like, 20-day treks into the desert and stuff like that. And those people are always like, yeah, they like Julian figured out something by accident that military people know, which is that you can't be hard unless you live hard. It's not possible. You can't. Your brain just gets soft because it's adaptive, right? So whatever it is that your current environment is, you become adapted to that environment. Just so it's easy to meditate for 3 hours in a temple, and then you're in your regular daily life, and the next thing you know, you got your iPhone, and your dog needs a walk, and your parents are calling you, and by the end of the day, you've done nothing if you don't set up your environment so that it works in your favor.
Wow, Julian, that's really amazing. I can actually relate. Like when I was in the hospital, I found it really easy to just sit there and do nothing for hours. But then when I go back home and I'm in the rigors of like daily life, so fast paced, it's so hard to meditate. You're
Hmm.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
So let's change gears here as we reach the end here. One cool blog post of yours, and you've got a ton of them, but one of them is called Scars, and it's about how a well-lived life will create these, physical, mental, emotional scars. So on that note, could you talk about some of the maybe scars in your life that you don't mind sharing? Some tough experiences or leaning towards the flinch that you went through in order to become the Julian Smith that you are today?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I got to tell you that the reason that I wrote this book is because I still have probably just as many or more problems with it than almost anyone. So I'm definitely one of the most risk averse and sort of I have a lot of challenges in terms of being able to, even just dealing with people on a daily basis, like all of these things. Many people people have post-traumatic stress disorder or people who need to do speech therapy, like that stutter,
Uh-huh.
like came at me and were like, this is the way that they teach you to get over your problems or whatever. And that makes a lot of sense to me because I am that person in a lot of sort of more subtle ways. So to me, I've always been the person who was like super avoidant. When I was in high school, like I got to a point where I stopped taking the bus because I was picked on so much on the bus. I started biking to school instead to be able to get to where I needed to go. And like, so to me, like, I honestly believe that every single experience that you've gone through, every negative, ends up sort of reinforcing your personality. The way that I think about it, I dated a girl for 4 years who had scars over 1/3 of her body because she had been burnt when she was a child
Mm-hmm.
at the age of 4. And what happened was, like, imagine someone who's in an accident and they're like really totally disfigured. Like they're
Yeah.
maybe even they lose a limb or something like that. Like many different things happen in someone's head like that. Or someone who comes back from Iraq is another great example, who's had some kind of like horrible. I read something in GQ earlier in a magazine. It was like somebody who had been in the middle of an incendiary device and who was basically on fire for like a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And imagine these people, and when they come back and they're alive, right?
Yeah.
Like they have no choice, and their personality has to change. Many different aspects of their personality has to change. Many different ways of them viewing themselves have to change. One of the things is you're like, wow, like I handled that. I survived, you know?
Yeah.
And immediately when you take it out of the sort of mindset of of not just, oh, woe is me, why would this happen to me, and it's so terrible. You just be like, no, it's a luck of the draw, and it happened to me, but look at how I dealt with it. I'm alive, and I was able to handle that. And I happen to think that, and I know this also from spending tons of time among people who, athletes, and also people who did body modification, like people who did scarring and tattooing and piercing on a really extreme level, that the more markings that you have on your body, the stronger you end up feeling. So you have these scars, and they're also memories for you. They're like a book of memories at the same time. I personally feel that if you have no scars on your body or nothing at all, you have no ability. Your body has no memory of anything that happened. Like, you need some kind of scar to be able to go, okay, that was the end of this stage of my life and the beginning of this stage of my life. Or go, well, you know what, that reminds me of this experience, which was really vital to me. So to me, the body is almost like it's not separate from the brain. It's one with the brain, and the experiences that happen to the body have no choice but to have an impact on your brain and how you think as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, Julian, to conclude, got here kind of this question here. What is your cause? Your cause in the world? What is it that you, Julian Smith, want to have happen in society and in the world as a result of your existence?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I would say that it's something like to make people realize that they are capable of withstanding a lot more than they think they are, and that they're in fact significantly more resilient than they ever thought that they were. They were able to handle more than they ever thought they would be able to handle. Like a human being, all of life really is sort of adaptive, and it evolves around what its environment is. So almost, I guess the lesson in a sense is that human beings are animals and are life forms the same way that everything else is, and we will adapt to whatever comes our way. It'll either destroy us, it'll literally kill us, or we will be made stronger maybe by what happens. So the idea of putting yourself into a number of uncomfortable places will in fact make you more comfortable in general, and will help you with whatever comes your way in the future.
Yes. Could not agree more, Julian. Thank you. Thank you so much for stopping by the Real Story interview series. Julian Smith, by the way, where can we contact you?
Well, I have a blog. It's at inoveryourhead.net, or you can look on Amazon for a book, The Flinch, which is my most recent work. It's available for free. You can download it. Lots of people have done it already, and I'd be curious to hear what you think when you read it.
Awesome. The Real Story interview series, Julian Smith. OptimisticWellness.com. Optimism is the only way. Thank you for listening.